Welcome to my first video. I would like to dedicate this video to World Press Freedom Day. It is the role of the journalist to gather and impart information, and as it is true with every other right, there is an equal and balancing set of responsibilities. It is not the role of the journalist to sell advertising. It is not the role of the journalist to sensationalize or misinform. And it is not the role of the journalist to use psychogenic triggers for profit. Journalists have a duty to support and defend the rule of law. Journalists have a duty to support and defend representative democracy. Journalists have a duty to support and defend human rights. Journalists have a duty to support and defend freedom of the press. And journalists have a duty to support and defend other journalists that have been interfered with. Modern society is complex and fast-moving, causing many people to experience anxiety and fear. It is the role of the journalist to take highly complex sets of information and reduce them so that you don't experience fear and that you don't experience anxiety or confusion. It is the role of the journalist to provide you with information so that you can have informed and intelligent opinions and so that you can make informed and intelligent decisions in a clear and high-minded way. If you can walk away from a communication thinking, "Yeah, I knew that all along," then you've just experienced a very high level of communication. To assist me in communicating with you, I want to introduce you to what I call the reasoning warrior. As you can see, the reasoning warrior has had a tough year and he's only got one eye left. He stands before you with the shield and spear, with the horizon behind him. He is ready to poke the angry ogre. For the purposes of evaluation, I need to assign values to what you see. The first value that I would like to assign is how dangerous everything is. As I live in Canada, I'm going to use the life expectancy of the Canadian, which is 81 years, to define the aggregate of all dangers. So let the horizon equal to the danger of everything, 81. Let all things above the horizon be less dangerous than everything else, and let all things below the horizon be more dangerous than everything else. Let's introduce two more elements, the circle and the oval. Let the circle represent that class of all things that are less dangerous than everything else. And let the oval represent that class of all things that are more dangerous than everything else. Now let's introduce the rectangle and the diamond. The rectangle represents reasonable limits. Reasonable limits would apply when matters are more dangerous than everything else, and reasonable limits would not apply when matters are less dangerous than everything else. Furthermore, let the diamond represent a substantial deviation from how dangerous everything else is for reasonable limits to apply. Finally, let the black dot equal the danger from COVID-19. In Canada, the average age of death from COVID-19 is 85 years. In Canada, the median age of death from COVID-19 is 86. This clearly places the black dot representing COVID-19 in the circle. This supplies us with a graphic representation of a big picture within which can be found a syllogism. Syllogisms supply irrefutable conclusions and are part of the reasoning process. The syllogism looks like this, and the syllogism sounds like this. The dot is in the circle. The circle is not in the rectangle, therefore the dot is not in the rectangle. The syllogism is in the form of all x is in y, y is not in z, Therefore, X is not in Z. Irrefutable. When you have a bunch of journalists ramping up the COVID fear machine, it doesn't just affect the general public, but it affects bureaucrats and politicians as well. Bad journalism is a corrupt practice that affects the outcome of federal elections. Bad journalism is a corrupt practice that affects who becomes a leader of a party. Bad journalism can even cause the rise of totalitarianism and authoritarianism. In Canada, we have a big problem with bad journalism. The public, party members, and politicians need good journalists, otherwise they can't have informed and intelligent opinions, and they can't make informed and intelligent decisions. There is an interesting study paid for by Canada and largely ignored by Canada called Pathogens and Politics, where fear of disease, real or imagined, gives rise to authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Additionally, totalitarianism has been used as a marker to describe a state of mass psychosis. The reasoning warrior has presented you with an irrefutable conclusion that COVID-19 does not supply a license to employ reasonable limits in any way to interfere with rights or freedoms. At this point, you either agree with me or you do not. The rise of totalitarianism is sometimes used as an example of a community's descent into delusion. Delusions are described as being false beliefs that do not change even when presented with facts or logical explanations that counter that belief. Mass psychosis is when a large segment of society loses touch with reality. Carl Jung looked straight into the teeth of the totalitarian monster and evaluated both its heart and mind, and in his opinion, mass psychosis is far more dangerous than any contagious disease. Carl Jung would be referencing diseases like cholera, the Spanish flu, or even the Black Plague, not something lightweight like COVID-19. If we were to use his perspective as a metric, then reasonable limits might never apply with respect to communicable diseases at all. However, we don't need to examine that, as the facts have already spoken for themselves. COVID is real, and death by COVID is a terrible thing. Cancer is real, and death by cancer is a terrible thing. And cancer is more dangerous than COVID. Car accidents are real, and death by car accident is a terrible thing. And car accidents are more dangerous than COVID. However, no one's giving up their leisurely Sunday afternoon drive. Cardiopulmonary diseases are real, and death by cardiopulmonary disease is a terrible thing. And cardiopulmonary diseases are more dangerous than COVID, cancer, and car accidents combined. These are but a few of the possible comparisons, but the funding and the media focus is being placed on the least dangerous item. I support research into every field, but I think it is clear that we are living in a community making some very bad decisions. I witnessed a woman become extremely agitated when she thought there were one too many people at the post office, when she should have been relaxed and talking about her cat. She is a victim. She should have been able to feel safe, and that she was in a safe and comfortable space. Police are actually entering churches during church services to break up meetings, even though doing so breaches the Criminal Code of Canada. It's illegal to go to church, but it's okay to go to the liquor store. Neighbors are calling police on neighbors. How is that community health? No one has the right to freedom of association, even with their own families in their own homes. In Quebec, the police can show up and get a warrant of entry over the phone and go into a home and drag a family member out of a relative's house. That's a serious black eye for the judiciary. The court has a duty to protect individuals and the public from pitchfork-wielding crowds, even when that crowd is being led by a vanguard of profiteering PhDs with their entourage of funding stream-conscious administrators. The bottleneck appears to be the hospital ICU units, and we should have been able to adapt to that bottleneck in days or weeks, not in months or years. If this were actually a serious disease, we would be in big trouble. Failing to adapt to reality is the definition of psychosis. Politicians, bureaucrats, and administrators are coping with their failure to adapt to the bottleneck by using police force and limiting freedom of the public. To be perfectly clear, shutting down schools and businesses, that's insanity. Raiding people's homes and attacking churches, that's insanity. Suspending, limiting, and ignoring the right to travel, when the right to travel literally is freedom, that's insanity. Issuing force orders to inject children against the parents' wishes, rather than providing a school lunch program, that's insanity. Barring demonstrations against government ineptitude and mask-wearing orders, that's insanity. Ordering people to wear masks, that's insanity. Curfews are insanity. Senselessly pitting community members against each other, that's insanity. Allowing employers to use COVID vaccination as a job requirement, that's insanity. Being refused by an airline because you don't have a COVID vaccine passport, that's insanity. Having a COVID vaccine passport, that's insanity. Vaccine apartheid, that's insanity. COVID quarantine makes no sense, and that's insanity. Using police forces, men with guns, to enforce your will when you have failed to adapt, that's extra stupid and extra crazy. Spending so much money, fortunes were made, while people remain homeless and old people in care homes die of thirst when water is basically free, that's insanity. This is what mass psychosis looks like. This is what mass psychosis sounds like. It's been a hellish media event with the emphasis on hellish. In conclusion, I would like to ask you to do two things. Please keep things simple. Don't let them confuse you with a lot of details. And two, please stop being crazy. Booga wooga.